Hi, good morning. It's Jim from Mavstar Obseratory. You know, I think to say nothing over the last few days would be a bit ignorant. If there wasn't an explanation, I'm going to keep it as short as I possibly can. Look, guys, we know what times we're in. We are hopefully fully aware of how our governments are treating us with respect to releasing information, especially important information, such as the things that we cover here at our observatory. The pole shift, the amount of cosmic radiation that's inbound in our atmosphere, grand solar minimum, and it's difficult to run this observatory with no funds. Now we've got 28,000 subscribers here, and we're in a time where our organisations that we pay taxes for are not forthcoming with information and keeping us in the loop of what is taking place. Now, I said in the last video, I had some big news, and I really do. It's unprecedented what you're going to find out a little bit later on in this video, so just bear with me, but we need to cover up what's happened. So, I will try not to go on too much about it, but just so that you can get a bit of an understanding from where I'm coming from. First of all, we provide a service now, more than we ever did many years ago. We've been around on YouTube for about 7 years. We didn't charge anyone for anything. We didn't have any patrons up until January this year. But since we've had a little bit more support from patrons, and we've had a little bit of revenue from Google adverts, and trust me, it's nothing to write home about. We probably get £1.50 for every 1,000 views. And our average on every video, if you noticed, we barely sometimes touch 3,000. So we probably make about £3 something on adverts, on revenue with regards to that. But if you followed me for around 7 years, you'll know that I never asked for nothing, and yet I could have easily done some merchandise, made a little bit of money off that, selling t-shirts, mugs and cups and other sorts of things, hoodies, you name it. But I didn't. I'm not here, as some people think, just to make money, even though I said to people, I've got some big news, and I want a bit of support. I'm going to release it anyhow. One thing you probably know is I've never been mean, and I've never restricted anyone from the information. However, there is a point here. There are people that are regularly funding this observatory, and I think it's a little bit unfair on them because they're funding it for the people that don't fund it. And like I said, we've got 28,000 people subscribe to this channel on YouTube. We have 5,000 people view the website every week, and yet only a small amount of people, say 180 people on Patreon, and probably 50 people who support us on PayPal. And those are the only people that are supporting out of the 28,000. And I think it's a little bit unfair because, in this time, guys, we all have to work together. And the information that we now deliver on this channel and our website from the observatory is important. This event that we're covering, the magnetic reversal, is a rare event. The last time it happened was 780,000 years ago, and it's back on our doorstep today, and we are probably the only website covering it as much in detail as what we are. We do provide a service. We provide a service to people who are interested in knowing where the magnetic North Pole is at its current rate of migration across the Northern Hemisphere. We're covering now muon radiation, which is inbound as a result of more cosmic radiation through a low solar activity and a weakened magnetosphere. And these, guys, are having impacts. This radiation is having severe impacts on our weather systems right now across the world, as you already know from other channels that cover, the daily changes and progression with farms going offline and so on and so forth. So the point is, it gets a little bit frustrating when we get completely ignored, at a festive time of the year with regards to funds, and yet there's so much work to be done. It just becomes frustrating, and I do feel a little bit of empathy for those people that are carrying, those small amount of people that are carrying the weight for the larger amounts of people that are on this channel. People have suggested that we just make it, certain information available to patrons and people that support us on PayPal. And that would mean that the majority of the people on this channel would not receive the information, and the whole idea of this is to inform people. So, I don't think it's fair. But I don't think it's fair that there's a lot of people that do view the information and take it freely, do not help in any way. But we're always going to have people like that in our world, aren't we? People that want to take for nothing. But, can you imagine going into a shop and asking for your groceries for nothing? And it is no different, although, this is information and not things that you can actually put in your mouth. There is no difference to that in this day and age. The thing is, I don't control the monetary system. If there was another way of doing it, I'd gladly be a participant in that, if that was the case. But, it is the way it is. And, we cannot build anything. I can't go to my suppliers without money and purchase stuff. Now, the other day, I've purchased something. I'm not going to mention it. I want to leave it as a little bit of a surprise, but it's going to be another addition to our observatory. We'll talk about that later, but let's get into the big news and also clearing up a big misconception with regards to the grand solar minimum. And I can guarantee you this is going to create some turmoil on YouTube, because I believe that the people that are talking about grand solar minimum already know what I'm about to release on that. But that is not the big news. The big news comes after that. So let's first of all clear up this misconception with regards to the grand solar minimum and climate. Okay, so let's clear up this misconception that's been going around. And I have this feeling, guys, that I'm going to be hated by some channels on YouTube as a result of showing you guys this. But you know what? If we do not record the data that we've got accurately and honestly, then we are doing a misjustice to science. And right now there's a lot of shit being thrown at scientists because of just that very thing, not reporting the information fairly and accurately. So, one thing we can't do from this point on is cherry pick the data for our own benefit. Okay, so you can see there's obviously a couple of green lines on this chart, and on the right hand side we're looking at 400 years of sunspot observations, and on the left hand chart we're looking at temperatures. And these green marks, the first and second on the left chart, are the same time periods on the second chart on the right, the 400 years of sunspots. Now pay attention to what I'm going to say. Okay, so first of all, on the temperature chart, we're looking at a time period of around about 1650, which was the same time period of when sunspots hit zero. This time period was classified as the Little Ice Age. But was it sunspots that drove temperatures down, or was it temperatures changing before sunspots hit zero? Well, if we look at the temperature chart, we can see that 50 years before sunspots hit zero, temperatures had already dropped. If we look at 1600, we can see that. If we look at 1600 on the right hand chart, we can see that there is still around 35 sunspot numbers. So that means temperature had already dropped on this planet before sunspots hit zero. And that also means that sunspots at this point in time were not driving the climate. Clearly, 50 years lag. It can't be possible. So at this moment, guys, we can't say that it was directly responsible for causing temperatures to drop on the planet. If the Maunder minimum had happened 50 years before it did, then there would be something to look at, but it didn't. Again, if we look at the second mark on the temperature chart, representing a time period of about 1780, 1770, we can see that we're just before the Dalton minimum, which was, the start of the decay of sunspot numbers. Again, if we look on the temperature chart, we can see that global temperatures are still rising during that period of time, and they are way higher than the Little Ice Age recorded temperatures. Again, almost a 50-year time gap. And for that reason, guys, we can't say that sunspots are driving the climate, because clearly temperatures before the Little Ice Age, 50 years before, had already hit minimum. And as you can see, at 1600 or 1625, we still have sunspots recorded. So we can't say that this is related to sunspots temperature at this point. Now, the other day I said to you, you know, we can do many chemical reactions and we can do this with temperature on this planet. If we add more sulfur to the atmosphere, it's going to cool the planet. So whether that was responsible for creating temperatures to drop during the Maunder minimum is something that's got to be investigated. But right now we can't blame the drop in temperature. 50 years later we get the drop in sunspot numbers. We can't say that the Maunder minimum was caused by the Little Ice Age was caused by a drop in temperatures, because, you know, we can clearly see there is still sunspots before 1650. I hope I haven't confused you guys out there, right? You know, I'm just showing you something that needs to be cleared up with regards to this matter, because people are saying, when they look at the 400 years of sunspot observations, that temperature, yes, is described during that period of time as being in a Little Ice Age, but global temperatures weren't dropping as a result of the sunspot numbers decaying at that point in time. Temperatures had already dropped, and, you know, our Earth doesn't regulate the sun regulates the Earth. And, you know, for some reason, temperatures before the Maunder minimum had already dropped, as you can see on the temperature chart. So I hope I've cleared that up. And I know this is going to wind up a few people on YouTube, but, you know, you do your data. You explain to me how 50 years, you know, before the Maunder minimum, temperatures had dropped before the sunspot numbers had hit zero. And again, in the Dalton minimum, we can see that sunspot numbers are dropping, but temperature is increasing during that period of time. So, this isn't the big news, guys. What I'm about to tell you next is the big news. Prepare yourself for this. So, let's get this big news out of the way. Guys, I've showed you this chart many times, but the important point is that I want to point out to you on this is that we're looking at just the beginning of solar cycle 24 here, and I want to pay attention to solar cycle 23, solar cycle 22, and just the end of solar cycle 21. Now look at the cosmic radiation at the end of solar cycle 21. During solar minimum, we've got an increase in cosmic radiation, but during solar maximums, if we look at solar cycle 22, we can see that the radiation is pushed away and the numbers drop dramatically. So at the end of the troughs, we get high amounts of cosmic radiation. At the peaks of the solar cycles, or the solar maximums, should I say, you know, this radiation is pushed into a negative number. So every time we go through a solar cycle, at the bottom of the trough we get an increase in cosmic radiation. At the solar maximum point we get less solar cosmic radiation inbound as a result. So this is clearly showing us that our heliosphere is pushing away during solar maximum a lot of the cosmic radiation, and we're getting more protection. So we go into solar cycle 24, and this chart ends here because it's a space environment overview of 2014. Let me just show you on the solar cycles so you can see what's going on. Right, so this is solar cycle 24, 23, 22. So we know at the bottom of these troughs we get more cosmic radiation, and if we look at the chart above, we can see that over the time period of the sunspots, the last 33 years, the cosmic radiation during the solar minimums of these last 3 solar cycles have been increasing in amounts of cosmic radiation. This is not good for us. If we go back to here and just focus on 2015, because the next space environment overview, which covers 2015, reveals something rather dramatic. Let's have a look at that. So, as you can see, this is the space environment overview for 2014, but what this gives us is a little bit more of a peek as what's taking place during solar cycle 24. We know that this goes up to 2015,
and if this is obviously solar cycle 24, but if you just look at the amount of radiation during the peak, and I'm going to show you back on the chart where this is the solar maximum during solar cycle 24, and then look at the cosmic radiation underneath. This here is unprecedented, because this shows us that our primary defense, the heliosphere, which is generated by solar activity, which protects the whole of our solar system, is no longer strong enough to push away, even at solar maximum, the cosmic radiation that's inbound in our solar system right now. Now you can imagine what the organisations would have thought when they saw this happen for the very first time, because during solar maximums we usually have protection above that line, and as you can see, we're clearly having no protection during that time period. Although it isn't as strong as the troughs of solar at the end of solar cycle 23, you can see there's a lot more cosmic radiation inbound, but it doesn't go into them over that negative line where, you know, we receive less. So what this shows us is that the heliosphere is no longer pushing away any amount during solar maximum with regards to cosmic radiation. Guys, this is unprecedented, and I bet you if you check in the history of sunspot observations, this hasn't happened probably since the Maunder minimum. And this means that we've got no protection, or very little protection, from the heliosphere right now. If the sun continues to go into a low productive period for a prolonged period of time, all that's going to mean is we are going to get more cosmic radiation inbound in our atmosphere. Why is this unprecedented? Because, guys, we're also at a time where our Earth is going through a magnetic reversal. What does that mean? It means that during the reversal period, which could only be possibly 4 years to 7 years away from this time period, we're going to lose our magnetosphere, which is our primary protection. First of all, we've got the heliosphere, which protects us from a lot of the galactic radiation coming into our solar system, and then our last line of defense, which is on the cards to go down in the next 4 to 7 years, is going to allow more of this cosmic radiation in. And to be honest, I haven't efforted the amount of danger and risk this involves, but it's not good. It's not good that our heliosphere is now letting us down, and as you can clearly see, during solar maximum, if you look at this 2015, let me just show you where that is on the other chart. So as you can see where 2015 is, it's after the solar maximum, and we've got that data on that chart, and we can still see cosmic radiation being pushed through as a result of that. That's our heliosphere now weakening. We've got 4 years, guys, between 4 to 7 years before our last line of defense goes down. You know, we really are in unprecedented times. This is what our government organisations are fully aware of. And, you know, there is no two ways about it. This is, as I described, big, big news.
Mainstream media will occasionally talk about, you know, the last 33 years of solar cycles diminishing. They will also occasionally talk about the magnetic poles migrating, and they'll butter this up so it's nothing for you to worry about, you know, go on as business as normal. But these are rare events that are taking place in our life and right now in our presence. But one thing the mainstream media won't talk about is that what I've just pointed out to you. And, you know, you've only got to look at what they are now investing, literally trillions of pounds of money in, to investigate, and you'll find that it leads to cosmic radiation. You'll probably understand now why, you know, I am so eager in early January to get a muon detector out, a magnetometer and a Geiger counter out into South Africa or Brazil and in Australia, and that is to measure those two intensities. First of all, we got the Atlantic anomaly, which is the lowest region of magnetic intensity on our planet right now, which covers Brazil and South Africa. And we also have an high intensity in South Central Australia, coming up towards the equatorial region, and we want to get those equipment out in them fields, so that we can monitor the high intensity and the low intensity. We can monitor the amount of muons in those regions, and we can get an idea as to what's going on with levels of protection, if any, in them regions. So it's really important, guys, that we get supported to do this, because you've got two opportunities. You either rely on mainstream media to inform you, and as you know, it's not forthcoming, it's not even accurate, and you can see almost a communistic attack on people with alternative versions as to what is going on with our climate. Certainly something is going on with our climate, and we have surpassed a point probably around about 2007, 2008, where things have started to cool down on this planet, and despite CO2 increasing. So CO2 isn't responsible for driving the climate in favour of warming, because now CO2, as we see, is increasing, yet temperatures are going down. Something else is responsible for climate. If we look in the past, we know it's not directly due to low levels of sunspot activity, because 50 years before that, temperatures had already cooled. So what caused that to cool, yet there was still sunspots at that time? If it had been the other way around, it would have been nice for us to make a conclusion on that, but it's not the case. But the main thing is, and more than anything else, is that there is a big effort by global governments around the world to investigate cosmic radiation. There must be a reason for that. And we are on the ball here. It has led us this path of investigation to that single point, cosmic radiation, and we've got now detectors at our observatory which are monitoring that. And even though we're only receiving probably 500 muons per square metre per hour, I still think that is way too much. But as time continues, as we've seen with the low solar output and the lack of protection from the heliosphere, we're going to get more cosmic radiation inbound. And these organisations know that, and they also are aware of the magnetic poles reversing on this planet, and the implications as a result of that will mean that the magnetosphere at some point will decay a lot more than 20% that it already has at this present time. And that will mean more cosmic radiation inbound. The only alternative that people have is to seek, independent observatories like ours for the answers. And we present what we get, whether people like it or not. And trust me, I'm going to get some flack off some other YouTube channels for showing you guys the truth with regards to sunspot numbers and temperatures at some point down the road. Because obviously they have built channels on the principle that sunspot numbers drives climate down, and if that's the case, we shouldn't have climate going down before sunspot numbers hit zero. It should be the other way around, and they're going to lose the bread and butter because of that. But what are we in the business here doing? Are we in the business to cherry pick the data and misinform the public like the bigger organisations are doing, or are we here to set the record straight and give science, a little bit of credibility? Because over the past, we've seen scientists protecting the paycheck in order to mislead people. We've seen the politicians turn around to the scientists and say, no, you will show us this. And that's how we end up with temperature records from the 1980s to the present day showing a rise in temperature matching climate, CO2. Where do we want to be in the future with regards to seeking information? If you want the truth, it has to come from independent researchers like myself, and little observatories that don't just talk about, charts and things like that actually build the equipment to put it out there in the field. But you know what, guys? it ultimately has to be funded. You know, over the last couple of days, you know, we managed to raise £700, but in comparison, that's nothing. You know, we're using the state-of-the-art equipment, the same as what NASA, the European Space Agency, and all the other organisations, like, you know, that facility down in Antarctica right now, the Ice Cube Laboratory. We're using the same silicon photomultipliers as what they are. And you guys are really lucky that I've had the skills, I've had to, you know, I've had to put myself through it to learn how to program this equipment, so I can build things like the TriMag system, the magnetometers that go out there, the magnetosphere detector. You know, okay, we had a little bit of help from MIT putting that, files out so that we could copy it and build the muon detectors, but we've got them now, and I had the skills to put them together. But, you know, there's more. We've got to do a lot more. You know, we've got a lot of answers that need to be answered. And, you know, we can't have the majority of the people on this channel, you know, not supporting. And, you know, it gets frustrating when, you know, I see some people, like over the last couple of days, it's down to solely just a couple of people that have put the biggest amounts of money in. A lot of people have put £5 here and £5 there. You know, just the sensor I brought the other day, I'll let you in on that. I wasn't going to yet, I was going to wait until I got it all up and running. But the sensor I've brought is a Luminox sensor from SST, and that should be in the post in the next few days. That sensor come in at 80 something pounds. You know, these silicon photo multipliers, again, £80 each. You know, when you're building this equipment, it's not cheap. And I can't go to these suppliers and ask for nothing. You know, I've got to hand over the cash for this equipment and, you know, invest the time in building it. But this Luminox sensor will give us a prolonged, accurate level of atmospheric oxygen in our atmosphere, and we'll be able to add that to our website, because I know that that is one of the concerns for a lot of you people. You want to know how much oxygen we're actually consuming, because let's face it, look how much oxygen we burn on this planet. 7 billion of us. A lot of us have cars, so, you know, in the combustion of engines, every cycle, you know, 3 litres. If you've got a 3 litre car, you're burning 3 times the amount of what you are fuel in oxygen. You know, we're consuming oxygen. But if there's a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere anyhow, plants will thrive and they will produce a lot more oxygen. But, you know, I still think it's interesting to keep an eye on that. So, you know, we had to invest in the money to buy that sensor, and there's going to be time invested in programming that sensor. It's got quite a lot of technology in this sensor, and I'll show you when it gets here over the next few days. The way it reads oxygen in the atmosphere is through an ultraviolet light shining on a white surface, and it allows through the porous surface of the sensor to have atmospheric air in there. Then through pressure, temperature, and all the other things, it manages to come up with the correct amount of atmospheric oxygen, which should be around about 20.7. And I know what people are thinking, oh, it should be 20%, but we're talking about wet air, not dry air. If it was dry air, it would be 20% oxygen content. So it gives us a very accurate level of oxygen in the atmosphere. But what I don't want to take away is what we're actually aiming to do in January, and that is get that equipment out there in the field, and that gives us an idea of whether these low intensity regions give less protection to cosmic radiation as opposed to the high intensity regions. That's a big question we can answer pretty much straight away with that equipment going out in the field. So, you know, I always want to keep it available to everyone, but at the same time, what I'm trying to encourage people here, and what I did in the other video, is just say to you guys, you know, we all are in this together, and we all need to put in a little bit more of an effort than what we've done. And to see all our efforts go, you know, completely unhelped during this period of time is disheartening. You know, at the end of the day, we're trying to do things honestly here, answer the questions for you guys fairly and honestly, and do it in a means of scientific analyst. So, you know, the link is down there if you want to support that effort. And, you know, I do understand there are some people that can't afford to, But, you know, I will keep delivering the information to even you guys so that we don't, you know, push anybody aside because of the lack of funding that they may have. But if people are trying to make me believe that, you know, there's 28,000 subscribers and all 27,500 of them are on the poverty line, then I find that hard to believe. If that is the case, then we're in a lot worse state than what even I think. Because, you know, I think we can all afford a little bit. Okay, there's no need to go on anymore other than mention the links down there. We do need constant funding to continue doing what we're doing. And as you can see from what we've, you know, revealed today, that big news, and you know what, guys, you can't deliver big news like that every week. It just would be impossible. It would be a fantasy to do that. But it is very important news that our, you know, first line of defence is no longer protecting us from cosmic radiation even during a solar maximum. And if they continue to drop off these solar cycles in amounts of sunspot activity, then we're going to receive even less protection. So, you know, that is big news. And of course, let's not forget, 4 years till a possible reversal taking place on this planet. At that point, we lose our primary defence, our secondary defence, and cosmic radiation will stream in. What that will lead to will only be more of what we're already aware of, you know, with cardiac arrhythmia effects and cancer causing symptoms as a result. So, you know, I'll leave you with that, guys. I'll say what I usually do. Have a reasonable week, or a great week, or, you know, an amazing week, as best you can with regards to the information I've put out there. And I'll catch up with you in a few days' time. Take it easy. Bye for now.